right, this week, I know earlier this week on our video, we were working on making connections between our life and a story. We were also working on that last week, and you guys have been doing amazing. I thought that you guys were ready for something a little more challenging since you guys have been doing so great making connections between your life and stories. Today, we're going to be reading a story called Arctic Animals. Instead of making connections between our life and this story, we're going to work to make connections between this book and another book. We're going to use two texts and find connections or things that are the same between the two books. We read Animals earlier this week. We are going to be finding connections between the book Animals and the book Arctic Animals. As we're reading, I want you to be thinking, if you see something that reminds you of our story Animals from earlier this week, I want you to write it down, because at the end, we are going to look between the two books and find things that are the same or things that are connected. So today we'll be reading Arctic Animals. This is written by Sarah Gussin. Some animals live in cold places. The Arctic is one of the coldest places on Earth. Hares live in the Arctic. They turn white in the winter. A hare is like a rabbit. Snowy owls live in the Arctic. They hunt in the day. Foxes live in the Arctic. They have thick fur. I think I remember another animal having thick fur from our story, Animals. We'll have to look back at that in a little bit. Wolves live in the Arctic. They hunt in packs. Caribou live in the Arctic. They are good swimmers. Moose live in the Arctic. They fight with their antlers. Some of our other animals in this story, I think, had some antlers. Harp seals live in the Arctic. They have white fur as pups. Pups are babies. When they're baby seals, they have white fur. Orcas live in the Arctic. They hunt many sea animals. Polar bears live in the Arctic. Mom stays home with their cubs for years. Their cubs are their babies. The end. Now, looking at these stories, Animals right here, and Arctic Animals right here, we're going to try to make some connections or find things that are the same. Today, when we make connections, we're going to write them in this middle. This is called a Venn diagram. When you're comparing stories or comparing two objects, you might use a chart like this. This circle right here is for the story Animals. This circle right here is for the story Arctic Animals. But I noticed that these two circles in the middle, this is part of both circles. I'm going to circle this one in blue, Arctic Animals. I'm circling that story also in blue. So you can see this blue circle and this black circle, they overlap. This is saying this is part of both circles. This is going to be where we write things that are the same, connections that we make between the two stories. So as we were reading, one thing that I noticed was Arctic Animals told us a lot about animals that live in the cold, that live where it's really cold and snowy. And animals. Before we start making connections, I'm gonna flip through and show you some pictures so that you can start thinking, what do you see from this book that reminds you of things in this book? I'm gonna show you the pictures before I show you some connections. We have the elk, the giraffe. We also have the elephant. We have the page with snow leopards, the page with camels, the fox page, the zebra page, kangaroos, hippopotamus, and our polar bear page. Now, the big connection that I think of first is on this very last page of our book, Animals. It says, polar bears live in cold places. I see the polar bear standing in the snow. They have thick fur to stay warm. They eat seals, birds, and fish. There are many kinds of animals. Let's keep it right here on this polar bear page. Let's see if my marker will hold it. There we go. All right, Arctic animals. If we go to the polar bear page, they also had a polar bear page, and it was also the last page. Both books had polar bears at the end. This page says, polar bears live in the Arctic. I know the Arctic is where it's very cold. Moths stay with their cubs for years. Now, these pages have things. Let's see if I can get this to stay. I'm gonna hold this one. These two pages aren't completely the same. They don't have the exact same words. They don't have the exact same pictures, but I noticed some connections. I noticed some things that are the same between these two pages. The first big one is, what are these polar bears standing on? Does it look like they're in a hot day out in the sunshine? No, they're both standing on snow, and both pages tell us that polar bears live in cold places. So one thing that's the same is both books tell us that polar bears live where it's cold. In the middle, I'm going to write polar bears live in the cold. I'm even going to draw a snowflake because to remind myself what I wrote. Polar bears live where it's cold. Both stories told us that polar bears live where it's cold. I also noticed something else that's the same about this. The illustrations of the polar bears. Are these paintings or drawings? I'm going to show you up close. Both illustrations are photos. They're real pictures that somebody took with a camera. So I'm going to put another connection, another thing that's the same between these books is the pictures are photos. Pictures equal photos. Now you guys know Miss Ellis isn't a very good drawer or a very good illustrator, but I'm going to try to draw a camera. Here's my little camera. So the pictures in both stories or the illustrations in both stories are photos. So both of these stories told us about polar bears, and they both told us that they live in cold places. This one told us a little bit different information than this one, but they still had a lot of connections, a lot of things that were the same. Let's look at another page. Let's look back through our Animals book. I'm going to go to the snow leopard page. On this page it says snow leopards live on a cold mountain. Oh, they're also in a cold area, and I also see snow on theirs. They have thick fur to keep them warm. Let's see if that'll hold. There we go. Now let's think about this one. Back through these animals. Ooh, I see a polar bear in this story at the beginning too. I'm going to stop on the fox page. It says, foxes live in the Arctic, or where it's cold. They have thick fur. Are both of these the same animal? We have a snow leopard and a fox. No, they're not the same. I do see both of them still have photos for their illustrations or pictures. Both books are still using photos. Both animals are on the snow, but there's something else that I realize that both animals have. I want you to think for a second and see if you can think of what it is. I'm going to show you both pages. You might be able to tell from the pictures, but you definitely will be able to tell from the words. All right, now let's look at our snow leopard page. I want you to say, what do you think is the same? What connection do you have between our animals snow leopard page? Let's see if this will stay. And our Arctic animals foxes page. I want you to say out loud real quick the connection you made between the two. Both of these animals, this page, let's read it. Foxes live in the Arctic. They have thick fur. Snow leopards live on cold mountains. They have thick fur to keep them warm. They both have thick fur, and that's to keep them warm in the cold. So I'm going to say, from Arctic, foxes have thick fur. And that equals, that's the same as snow leopards. Have thick fur. Both of these stories told us the same thing. It was different animals, but they both have thick fur to keep them warm. Now, both of these stories, Arctic animals and animals, have many things in common, many things that are the same that we noticed. We noticed that both of them told us that polar bears live in cold places. We realized that both books use photos as their illustrations. Both didn't have paintings or drawings. They had photos, real pictures. Both books told us about animals that have thick fur, and animals, foxes have thick fur to keep them warm, and it told us about that. In Arctic animals, it told us about snow leopards that also have thick fur to keep them warm. Now, I know that both of these books, Animals, and Arctic Animals, have lots more in common. They have a lot more connections that you can make, a lot more things that are the same. I want you to try to find some more, at least one more connection or one more thing that is the same in both of these books. You can go back through the video and look at some of the pages I read, some of the pages we looked at, and try to make one more connection. You can either say this connection out loud to a family member, you can draw it or write it to show your teacher. I just want you to be working on making one more connection. Now, you guys have been doing so great making connections between yourself and books, between two books. You guys are doing awesome. We'll keep working on this together next time. But I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you guys find some awesome connections between these two books. See you next time.